Hello and welcome everyone to our career conversation today. My name is Tanya Roberts and I am an associate professor at the UW-Madison School of Nursing, and I'm going to be facilitating this session today with Fred Coe, who's an associate professor from the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and Wen Liu, who is an associate professor from the University of Iowa College of Nursing. We are presenting today a presentation on interviewing for your first tenure track position. And this session today includes a range of panelists who are going to be speaking about what interviewing is like for your first tenure track position from various perspectives. And before we really get started for today, just a couple of little logistical considerations. Please keep your audio on mute during the event and submit your questions for the panelists through the Zoom chat. This conversation is being recorded and it's going to be available after the event. So to open our session today, I would like to introduce our panelists. And we are delighted to have a distinguished group of GSA members joining us today to share their perspectives on interviewing for tenure track positions. So first, I'd like to welcome Dr. Anju Paudel, who is an assistant professor at Penn State School of Nursing. And she's relatively new to the tenure track and has had recent experience preparing for a tenure track position. We also are joined by Dr. Barbara King, who is a tenured professor from UW-Madison School of Nursing, and she has some extensive experience on serving on the school's search and screen committee, so she has that perspective on the tenure interviewing process. And we will be joined by Dr. Charles Mobb, who is a tenured professor at Icahn School of Medicine. He has extensive experience from the perspective of mentoring students and postdocs who are preparing to interview for their first tenure track position. I think, has Dr. Mobb joined us yet?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, great.
Yay.
I'm glad you're here. All right. So we look forward to this engaging and enlightening conversation. And I'm going to hand it off to Fred now at this point, and he's going to get the panel started by asking our panelists some questions to get the discussion going. So take it away, Fred. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tanya. I just want to echo you in welcoming our panelists. This is very exciting. We have a great group of panelists that I think would be very insightful and add to this discussion. So we do have several prepared questions that I like to ask our panelists. Feel free to jump in after I pose the question. So the first question is, actually a two-part question. What does the typical interview process look like during the job search process? And can you please share some tips on how to prepare for the interview process as well as the job talk? Please jump in.
Okay, I'll go first. I guess seniority before beauty or something like that. Anyway, I just want to thank the organizers. This is a great panel. I wish I'd had this panel when I was in that place that I would have needed it. But so a couple of points I would make is that it's extremely unusual. So I'll confess, I'm an introvert. I don't really like, chit-chatting and going to just sort of meetings just to chit-chat. But the truth of the matter is, it's very important at this, especially in the early stage of your career, you get out there and meet people, and you never know what conversation is going to lead to what. So I'll just give you an example of my career. When I was younger, I went to a lot of meetings, and especially some of the smaller meetings were especially really informative. I got to know senior people in the field, and I just loved them, and they really inspired me to want to continue doing aging research. But I was a basic scientist, so I started out my career, actually my faculty career at Rockefeller University, very prestigious place, great science being done there. But at a certain point, I just felt like it was very too ivory tower. And I wasn't really working directly on aging research at the time. I was building up toward it. And so I said, I just don't think this is quite the right environment for me for what I want to do, which is very clinically oriented. And so, but I love New York City. I wanted to stay in New York City. My fiance loved New York City too. So I said, well, gosh, what can I do? Well, it just so happened I had just met a few months before at a small meeting, Dr. Jack Rowe, if you know who he is. And he's a legend in the field. He was head of geriatrics at Harvard, and he created the concept of successful aging, which is still a super important concept. I might have spent 5 minutes talking to him at this meeting, but I'm like, well, I don't have a huge number of choices. So I just wrote to him directly. He was president of Mount Sinai at the time. I want to point out. And I said, Dr. Rowe, I would love to continue doing aging research, and I'd love to do it in a clinically oriented place like Mount Sinai. What do you think? And his secretary called me back, I guess the day they got the letter. That was a letter in those days, physical letter. And he invited me to come in and just have a quick conversation with them. And like a couple of days later, I had a job offer. So now, of course, I had credentials, I had papers, I had grants, stuff like that. But still, that little bit of just personal kind of contact made all the difference in the world to me. So now I did, nevertheless, I was not allegedly hired by the president of Mount Sinai. In fact, that was what happened. But on paper, I was hired by the co-chairs of my department. And they were a little annoyed at being kind of had this random guy thrust upon them. They were just starting off this new department of neuroscience. And, they didn't want to have the president tell them who to hire. And so, I kind of was aware of that. And so, of course, I went in to give it like a job talk at the interview with them. And I made it my business. I actually kind of knew pretty much what their research was anyway, but I really made it my business to make sure I understood what they thought was important. And I largely agreed with them, and how my work would connect to their work personally. And that was not really a direction they had planned to go in, as a Department of Neuroscience. And here I was, an aging person. I thought I was going to go to the Department of Geriatrics. And Dr. Rowe was kind enough to point out to me that's a really clinical department, right? Right, Fred? And so I mean, of course, that was the main reason I wanted to go to Mount Sinai, is because of the geriatrics department. He said, but you should have your main department as a basic research department, have an appointment in geriatrics, and it'll all go well. So I really just made it my business to really, frankly, kiss up to these two co-chairs, and I guess it worked because and they offered me a position, and I took it right away. And actually, there's a little bit of kind of a little confusion at a certain point, and I had several other job offers at the time, and so everything wasn't quite falling into place. So I called Dr. Rowe's office. There's a few details that need to be nailed down. Well, he was out at his vacation home on the Cape, which he'd had since he was at Harvard. And I said, "Oh man," because I had to decide that day where I was going to do. He called me up from his Cape bungalow and said, "Charlie, what's going on?" And I told him, he said, "Okay, fine, we'll take care of it." And he took care of it, and the rest is history. So I'm going to say it's not. I'm not going to say it's not what you know. It's who you know. You really do know what you have. You do have to have something to contribute, but it's a human enterprise. And just make it your business to really know what the people you're going to be working with value, and make sure it aligns. In my case, it really did, and it's been great for me. And the association with the Department of Geriatrics has been fantastic, as, for example, my great relationship with Fred. So anyway, that's my 2 bits.
Thank you so much, Charles, for your insight. I know for me, some of the takeaways include, don't be shy, feel free to reach out and start the process early. It's okay to use email. Technology has advanced. Planting the seeds early sounds to be very important. And then figuring out whether there's synergy between what you're interested in, what you do, and the potential employer and mentors and collaborators are doing are all very important. So I just want to pose the same question to Barbara and Anju, again, specifically focusing on what that typical job search process is like, as well as how to prepare for the interview or job talk as a part of the job interview process.
Yeah, I can go next and share my most recent experience. Firstly, thank you for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share my knowledge and experience. And just like Dr. Mobs, I think Dr. Mobs set the stage perfectly. I'll just go ahead and share my experience. And in sharing my experience, I'll just dive into the interview process in itself, like what we do in terms of standard format these days for tenure track faculty interview. So the interview process in itself, once you submit your application and you hear back being invited for the interview, the process itself is, I would say, it's a multi-step process where it would start with that screening interview at the beginning, and it's normally you're interviewed by the faculty search committee that can include up to 4 members. And basically, during that time, your job is to convince the committee that you are able to significantly contribute to the department or institution, wherever you are interviewing, through your efforts in areas of research, teaching, and service. So when you're interviewing for a faculty position, you would really want to take a stab at each of these areas, like how you can contribute. So that's the first step. And once you pass through that screening phase, then the next step is what is called a job talk, or maybe it's called a seminar. It depends. It's a presentation, basically, where you present your work. Like I would say 80% of the presentation would be your past and present work, and 20% would be like towards the end, where you will discuss your future goals, where you see yourself going, your research going. So that's the next step where you present. And then post that, it will be the last step, which is a bit hectic because it is a series of short one-on-one meetings with the faculty. So I think it will be a great segue to the next question on the tips. So what I would suggest in terms of tips is, once you get your itinerary, that's what you get once you are invited for presentations after the screening phase. And once you get that, take some time to know the people that are all listed in that itinerary. Go to the website, learn about their work, and also learn about the centers, institutions. So do your homework in terms of knowing the faculty, their work, and what's going on in the institution itself, what resources are available. From that, you'll know about the institution and faculty and the work that's going on there. And also, I think as you learn, you will definitely have some questions on your head to ask. And that's an important tip as well, like make sure you jot down your questions. So that's summary of what like I've been through and what typically we see these days in terms of interview process.
Wonderful. That's I think that really clarifies the process, what's like. Just one question before moving on to Barbara. You've mentioned, doing your homework, knowing which faculty, what they do when it comes time for the one-on-one meetings. But I was just curious whether besides faculty members, whether there might be others, others within the institution or department in different roles whom one would want to consider meeting as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you will, depending on your interview or where you interview, I think you will be also asked whether, like, who would you like to meet? And during that time, you can mention, and I think it would be good to meet the postdocs or even students just to know the culture of the institution and how they feel they're supported. So definitely not just the faculty. I think when we think about the interview research and all the work, faculty is what comes to our mind at first, but definitely I would recommend even asking about postdocs and meeting the postdocs and students. That will really give you a feel of the culture of the institution.
Wonderful, thank you. Barbara?
Yeah, so I will add on to what's already been discussed. I cannot stress the importance enough of networking to connect with individuals that are in your field of research and thinking about opportunities. And if they are looking for a postdoc or their positions within their departments or schools, our process at the School of Nursing at UW-Madison is very structured. But we have a set of questions that we ask every applicant for both postdoc positions and tenure track positions. So if you were applying to an organization, I would ask, is there a structured format? And do you have access to those questions either prior to scheduling your interview, or can you request them at least 15 minutes before you start? So our process is to send those questions out. So, it's hard in an interview because the questions are long and you're trying to track what people are asking you. So if you have something in front of you that you can refer to, really does help you collect your thoughts and being able to answer those questions fully, so that you don't skip over and you get nervous and you skip over and you didn't answer a particular point in the question. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of doing your homework. It's really evident when applicants come in and they haven't really even looked at the website of your department or your school or the university. And so you kind of feel like, oh, so we're just one of 20 that you're looking at, or one of 5. And it really starts to turn off the panel that's involved in the screening. We want people that want to be at our university or want to be within our school or department. So that doing the homework up front is a critical first step that should never be missed in preparing for an application, whether it's a postdoc or a tenure track. And in doing your homework, it's important to know who else on the campus can you collaborate with, and come prepared. Who's ever arranging your process or your interview may ask, are there others on this campus that you want to speak to? It's really impressive when an applicant says, oh, here are the following individuals that I also would like to have an opportunity to engage with and talk with, so that there may be a potential for collaboration in the future. So that, again, doing the homework. Who's doing what on that campus? And it may not even be like in my area, may not be in the School of Nursing, but it could be somebody in medicine or communications or machine learning or engineering, where there's a beautiful bridge and collaboration there. So you really want to know who else is doing work in your area that you can work with. And I will say, lastly, make sure that you have some publications that are in the hopper and ready to roll or have been submitted. That makes a much different impression on the interviewer and the panel, that you've already started disseminating your work, or you have been presenting at local, regional, and national venues. So getting those papers out during your PhD studies or during a postdoc, critical, absolutely critical, and a must prior to going in for an interview.
Thank you, Barbara. So homework, clearly, doing your homework is clearly a theme here. I guess an offshoot question is, you mentioned publications and presentations. I know that every field is different, but I imagine many of us are thinking, well, what is the standard for the field, the direction that we're going into? And if one doesn't quite have a sufficient amount of that, how can we bulk it up? How can we present ourselves so that we seem, one could appear to be a very strong candidate?
They don't even need to be first author right away. Maybe, are you co-authored? Are you co-authored with your mentor on papers? That's important. Dissertation papers, if you do a 3-paper format, how many of those have been sent out or are ready to be sent out would be important. Even to have them in review shows a trajectory of publication or a trajectory of being able to get your work disseminated. So I think that's really important. Years ago, when I applied for my tenure position, I was in a postdoc, and one of the faculty members to the School of Nursing said to me, "Barb, if you don't have at least 2 publications, don't even apply. Yeah, you take another year in your postdoc. They have to be out. Like, your publications have to be out, especially a dissertation publication." We have tenure faculty applicants, and even if they're in their postdoc and they haven't even gotten their dissertation papers out, kind of a red flag to us. So think about which papers should be prioritized that you get out, and at least get 1, get 2, but get them in review. That's really critical.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Charles.
Yes, I'd like to just elaborate on kind of a modern twist on that absolutely 100% correct statement of the state of affairs. My postdoc advisor said, if it's not published, it didn't happen, which, that's a reasonable place to start. But something that I have found just in the last couple of years, so this is new, but something they pass on, is the role of the preprints in like bioarchives. Because I was kind of suspicious of bioarchives for a number of years because, it's not peer reviewed. But in the last few study sections I've been on, the reviewers have clearly said, well, I understand why it's not published, but at least it should be on bioarchives. And of course, you're not going to put it on bioarchives unless, you're 100% behind it. So you're not going to put something out there that you're embarrassed about. So that's just something that has shifted in my perception, at least, that people should not hesitate to put their preprint on bioarchives while it works its way through the peer review process, which can be grueling. The more ambitious you are, the more grueling that can be. So it's kind of my sense is a pretty good sort of medium ground that you should take. You shouldn't be afraid of bioarchives. I was afraid of it for a while, but now everybody agrees, including Nature and Science. Put it on bioarchives first, then we'll talk. So just a word for the wise.
Great, thank you. I was not aware of that, so appreciate that a whole lot. So let's move on to our next question. What are some of the key questions an interviewee may want to ask during the interview process? And how do you tailor the questions appropriately to get the information that will support one's decision-making about accepting that position? Go for it.
Well, I hate to be the only one spouting things, but anyway, maybe I can loosen the audience up for smarter comments. This is my point about that. Is a great question and something we should all be aware of. What I tell, so of course I interviewed a lot of students for medical school and graduate school, and what I tell them is by the time they get to me, I'm really not looking to see if they're, suitable material. They wouldn't even be here if they weren't. So I sort of say, to some extent, my job at that point is to sell us to them. However, it's a little different for faculty because this is a very competitive position. And so what you want to convey at that point is you want to ask smart questions, but they really should be, how can I put this, kind of tailored to be making a point. So for example, this is one of those things like, list your flaws. Well, gee, I'm such a perfectionist. It gets in the way. So this is a case where you're asking questions that supposedly are helping you decide, but really is also continuing to sell yourself. So for example, you can say something like, I have found that collaborating with people that have different levels of expertise in different areas really important to my career. Would you say that is the kind of culture you have in your department? Of course, every department is going to say yes, but they'll appreciate the fact that you realize that was an important part of becoming part of a team, is that you're not just a one-man band. So it's I wouldn't say it's sneaky, but it's just something to keep in mind. You're at every level, you want to make sure that you fit in the department culture, but you can do that in a way that makes them also feel comfortable with you, that you'll be fit into the culture.
Okay. So framing thoughtful questions that align one's interests, and I guess with institutional mission or goals would be helpful. Thank you. Anju or Barbara?
I think what would really be important is think about what you feel you will need for supports, so that what you need matches with what the environment can provide. So, for example, if you need a statistician, it's important to know, do you have access to that, either at a university level or within your department of school? If you need collaborators, so what's the environment for collaboration? I will tell you at UW-Wisconsin, Madison, we are a playground for collaboration. In fact, we are such a playground that we have to tell our assistant professors, okay, that shiny ball looks really fun, but I need you to focus right here, focus on this. Because people love, as most academic institutions love to collaborate, because we build better science. So, but wanting to know, well, what's the culture and the atmosphere around collaboration? If your science heavily depends upon, or it would be better if you have other people to play with and think with and design and develop with. So those would be really critical. What kind of pre-award, post-award support is there within the organization? That's really critical. It helps you think about your own workload in your distribution. And the other thing I think it's really important is to understand what their tenure process is like and how many different divisions do they have. So most people in the School of Nursing go through the Social Sciences division. Both Tanya and I have taken our turns. Tanya is currently on divisional, and she's going to be the chair next year, or the incoming chair. So it's important to know that there are people within the department actually that have a really good sense of what that divisional requirements are and can help guide the assistant professor through that process of getting tenured. So you want to know supports, and do individuals have connections with the larger university, particularly around tenure, because they are unbelievably valuable going through a tenure process.
Excellent, thank you. Anju?
Yeah, I would also emphasize on, as you think about questions that you can ask, think about like what are the things that you will need, and also think through make sure that your question reflect that you have done your homework. Like for example, if you read about centers, if there are centers in your institution, and if you've read about centers, went through the website, you can say, I have read such and such about this center. I was not clear about this part, so I was wondering, and also you could elaborate a little bit on this part. So that way it shows that you've done your homework. And in terms of what you need, again, resources, what kind of resources are available for junior faculty, especially mentoring? What kind of mentoring support do you have at your institution for junior faculty? What does the tenure process look like? What are your expectations with regards to grants and scholarship? How can I become a good citizen at this institution? So all that reflect that you are wanting to work in the institution because you've done your homework and you feel like you have understood that it's a good fit. It should reflect on your questions.
Right. I guess, depending the type of resources that's being asked, some are easier to inquire, some are harder, especially given that, the candidate's still going through the job interview process. So wondering if you have some tips or thoughts about that. So I'm sorry if that was not very specific at all. So I'm thinking about, if we're thinking about lab space or personnel, additional resources that may be outside of established collaborators or institutes within an institution, knowing what they are is important, but are there better ways of asking for them?
We have several new faculty who need wet labs. We don't have a wet lab. Sub-zero storage, we don't have that. But if the building does in the department or school doesn't have capacity, and your science is in that area, it would be important to know, are there other spaces on campus that has that capacity, and can they either rent the space, work with others to have that space? That would be important to think about in terms of resource, depending upon your science and what you think you might need. Another important question would to know, is there funding for graduate students? Because funding for graduate students turn into PA positions or RA positions, turns into support for faculty members to help out with their program of research. So that would be important to know as a resource that commonly people don't think about, but it is it's a pretty important research, not only for mentoring and the next generation, but also to help and support the faculty member in their program of research. Does that school or department, do they offer postdoctoral positions in terms of resource? Again, there's another potential resource for a incoming tenure track professor that it might be available to them. And again, more support for their program of research, but also an opportunity to mentor the next generation. So I would think about those in terms of resources also.
Great, wonderful. I'm going to move on to the next question. How do you know and determine if there's a mutual fit between the candidate and the prospective employer institution during the interview process? And how do you identify some of these elements, essential elements of fit?
I can go ahead and start this time. I'll give you a break, Charles. I'm jumping in. I sit on search and screen, and so I think about fit quite a bit. And we actually have several faculty members who are interdisciplinary colleagues. They are not nurses, and it's really clear when you're in the interview that the applicant has no clue about a school of nursing. And that is a dead kill it every time. Where then how is this individual going to fit within the school if they don't really at all understand another whole, at least have some recognition of what another discipline has to offer, which would be important then to be able to align if you're a sociologist wanting to come into a school of nursing for a faculty position, thinking about how that skill set you bring as a sociologist really can help support faculty and other faculty members in collaborations and support further development of students. in their area, nursing and in research. So that fit, if you're coming from outside the discipline, is to think about where do you connect. And again, the homework. Did you do your homework? Did you look up on the website when we know about the school? What does the school focus on? Where are their priorities? How does what you do align with their priorities? That's critical. On our website, we list our research priorities. So being able to point out, I align with your priorities in this way. That's a great fit. You know, we always ask, why UW-Madison? Why us? Why are you coming here? You're from the East Coast. You've done all your research on the East Coast. Everything's on the East Coast. Tell me about Wisconsin. Like, what's drawing you here? Again, doing your homework, being able to respond to why Wisconsin? Is there a program of research that's drawing you here? Are there faculty members that are drawing you here? Is the school incredibly innovative and that's drawing you here? Finding ways to connect to the department or the school that you're applying to is really critical. It becomes incredibly evident during an interview that there's no connection.
Right. I haven't heard the word homework being used this often. And I have 3 little ones. Anju or Charles? Go ahead, Charles. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Well, I definitely want to second everything that Barbara just said. And you're right. The word for today is homework. Absolutely. And I was particularly stimulated by her comments because I've been looking into alternative sort of funding mechanisms that I had not really thought of before. And for example, so I went to a webinar, I guess, yesterday on the Nursing Institute. Now, I wouldn't have thought that was necessarily something that would be obvious that I would be a good fit for. I'm talking about the NIH Nursing Institute, but the same thing will apply to departments. But actually, once I got to learn more about it, I realized actually a lot of the work that I'm doing is dead on. So for example, one of my major research interests personally and professionally is health disparities. And health disparities kind of fall into, especially in geriatrics, it could fall into a wide range of, you might call clinical specialties, but that's something the Nursing Institute, and I now I have an better understanding, the nursing departments, that's a major kind of issue for them, and more so probably than any other department issuing that, emphasizing that same point. So when you're in this early stage and you're sort of trying to find your way in the world, you have to keep a very open mind about where you might actually be able to fit in very well that you might not have thought of. So again, this is more or less in the realm of homework, but it's just to kind of open your eyes a little bit, be a little bit more open-minded about options you might not have thought of otherwise.
Wonderful.
I would reiterate what Dr. Mobs had said earlier, like if you had applied and you're past that screening stage and you're giving your job tag, it means that there is some level of fit, identified at both the interviewer and interviewee level. But beyond that, like if you're thinking seriously and, thinking about the fit, again, go to the website, go to look at what's the area of focus. Like, for example, if your research is geriatrics, gerontology, does the institution have like center for, many institutes have Center for Gerontological Nursing Excellence or something like that. Is it there? Or even if it's not there, sometimes there are Center for Health Outcomes Research, and there are like areas of focus for that center. So go and take a look on that. And if you're able to identify 4 or 5 faculty which you feel like you can collaborate with in the future, and the area of focus, one of the area of focus is your area of research, I think that kind of gives some indication that there is some kind of fit. And also, a lot of the times while you're interviewing, I think you can also sense a bit of fit while you're interviewing. How does the interview go? How was the flow? So I think it's these are some of the ways I think we will be able to identify it.
Right. So I'm just curious, right? Because homework, doing the prep work for the interview process, it could be pretty all-encompassing. It takes time. So I was wondering if you have some thoughts or advice about, how much lead time one should account for, and how early should one start preparing for an interview. I mean, clearly it gets easier the more you do it, but I'm looking for any type of advice or tips that you may have about this.
I can go first this time. I guess like once you hear back, your interview is scheduled, you can start like early on. You don't need to spend hours every day, but if you start early on, 1 or 2 hours, if you spend time looking through the institution, and homework is just not learning about the institution, the faculty, or the place where you're interviewing. It's also if you have like senior colleague or other people that you can talk to, that's also a part of homework. You can talk to them and ask them about their experience, what kind of questions they were asked. So early the better, I would say, and do it in bits and pieces so that you're not putting all the work like right before the day of your interview.
Yeah, I just want to say I echo that. I've previously made mistakes of doing my homework preparation on the flight. Not the way to do it. Great. So I mean, I'm just thinking that maybe perhaps we could open this up to the participants. Wen and Tanya is wondering if there are questions that have come in that could be asked and addressed at this time.
Fred, we just have one question right now. And that question is for the panelists: what's the best way to answer or respond to a question from the Search and Screen Committee about possible challenges and weaknesses? So I don't know if each of you could maybe take a turn on that. Charles, you're nodding. Do you want to go for it?
I'm nodding because I kind of alluded to that early, because that's one of those trick questions. And so you should have a trick answer ready. So the famous trick question is, well, what's your greatest weakness? So you better have an answer, which is, I'm such a perfectionist. Sometimes it just really slows me down. So, and I think that's, I think in a way it's almost as much of a test for wit as anything else. Do you have your wits about you? But you're absolutely, but again, homework is the point. Yes, there should be questions like that because they want to see what you're made of. And so, yes, you should have the appropriate trick responses. So if they say, well, coming to this department, obviously you bring some resources, but what exactly do you expect to get out of us? Or some kind of slightly hostile question like this, something like that. And that's your opportunity to say, that's exactly what this is a perfect fit for me, because my skill set is so complementary to the skill sets of the other people in the department that together we can have synergistic research program, blah, blah, blah. So a little bit of a trick, but in truth, it's really, did you do your homework and do you have your wit about you? And so that's a great example of the kind of question you should be prepared to answer.
Thank you. Anju and Barbara, do you have any comments about this question?
So that's a question that that doesn't get posed in our Search and Screen Committee, but I could see how it would really throw somebody when they get asked that. And I read somewhere once that if you address what's your biggest challenge or weakness, you should address it and then give a positive spin on it. So my challenge as a qualitative methodologist is I'm not as well versed in complex quantitative analysis. My spin would be, but I'm really smart and I can pick things up quick, and I need to know who I'm working with and the resources and to get up to speed on what would be the best analytic approach to use that. But I also would spin it as, and if I had done my homework, noting what is the methodology predominantly used within the school, and be able to talk about the strength that I bring as a qualitative methodologist, and being able to support faculty and students that are interested in doing qualitative design and work. So then saying, yeah, I would have to work to get up to speed on that, but I also bring the skill set.
And
Great.
yeah, I would just add a little bit to that. I think that that's perfect way to identify your challenges first, and then add a positive spin to it. I would also add, often I find it easier when you have a story to tell. So if you had been in a situation, like oftentimes as during our journey in the PhD program, we also talk about between assignments and our work, right? So if there was some situation, and you at the end we get through it. So, and if you had that kind of situation, you can share that story as well.
Yeah, Fred, I see a couple more questions coming in here. There's another one about fit while we're talking about that. Wondering about how you can get a sense of the home or the potential colleagues at the campus, in the town or the city and the university. So are there ways to figure out if the university can be a home? Anyone can answer that.
So,
Barb, it looks like you have something you want to add there.
yeah, there is, how is the university at home? But the other important thing is, how is the town or the city at home? So, the university could be, I could have good collaborators here, but man, this is not where the vibe in the city does not fit what I want. So, it's much broader than, is the department or school a place to be at home? So trying to get a sense for what is the environment like. And when we have applicants come in, we talk a lot about, what is Madison like? Let me tell you about Madison. Let me tell you about Wisconsin. Yeah, you get winter. Yeah, we do. We do get winter. But the southern part of the state doesn't get hit as bad as the northern part of the state. So we can talk about climate. We can talk about, do you have kids? Different green space, what's different areas within the city, surrounding the city. That's important to try to figure out, is this going to be someplace you want to be at home? Does it fit other aspects of you besides your academic work that makes it a good fit for what you want? We have people all the time that ask us, what's your culture like? And, I think it's really important for people to be honest about what your culture is like, because you don't want to have the perception that everything is wonderful and everybody plays together and it's the best happy place to be. And someone gets there and maybe that doesn't feel like that. And so it's important to ask that question. Tell me about your culture. What types of initiatives has the school done to promote culture change? And what has that been like? That's an important question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is a kind of a sort of a story I tell a lot, which is you heard my reasons for wanting to come out Sinai from Rockefeller. And the basic reason I wanted to work with clinicians more closely, and especially in aging geriatrics department at Mount Sinai, is about as good as it gets. And I made my decision pretty much entirely on that basis, although having Dr. Rowe in my corner certainly helped. But the story I tell now in retrospect is what I didn't know at the time, but I really lucked out about, is that, well, I've been at MIT and Rockefeller for my career, and the elbows are very sharp at those institutions. So, good luck. Pretty much that's the official, that's the official culture, is good luck to you, buddy. And what I found, of course, at Sinai, which was just tremendous luck, but the culture of Sinai is very, very different. It's very collaborative, very supportive, very friendly, collegial. And I guess the point I want to make here is I didn't know enough to kind of even try to suss that out. But now when I interview students, especially, and if they volunteer that, it's like, why do you want to come to Mount Sinai? Well, because I really feel like at Mount Sinai, the culture is very collegial and supportive. I'm like, that is so smart that you figured out that you're in. And so I didn't figure it out ahead of time, but the advice I would give it now is, hey, listen, ask around with the junior faculty. What's the culture like? And tell people what you are looking for. And hopefully you're going to find some articulation that culture is what you're looking for. And if you say that, that really puts you a couple of steps ahead of everybody else.
Definitely, I would add to that, allude to that as well. When you get a chance to have those one-on-one meetings, especially with the junior faculty, you can really take that opportunity to ask them what their experience has been so far, what kind of teaching load they have, what kind of mentoring support they're receiving, or even in terms of like grant submissions, what kind of support they're receiving. And that will be really helpful. And when you are there for the campus visit, I think you'll get a little sense of culture because just you are in that environment. But really, I would recommend that you take that opportunity to ask those questions to the junior faculty, really their experience so far, what it has been, and also ask them about the place, what kind of recreational activities they do around, or what's available. I think that would be another way as well. And as I'm seeing the question, I just saw the question about the structure, so I would just go ahead and answer that as well. So these campus visit agendas, they are pretty structured. Like I said earlier, you're provided with an itinerary, and there is like what time you're meeting who, it's clearly mentioned there. So it's pretty much structured from breaks to if you're going for lunch with faculty or a group of faculty, everything is listed in there. So it's pretty much structured, the visit itself.
Well, unfortunately, we only have about 6 minutes left in the session. So if any of the panelists see any of those additional questions in the chat and can chat in any of your thoughts or responses, that would be great to sort of close up some of those. But otherwise, let me turn it over to Wen to close up our session for today.
Sure, thank you. So to bring our session to close today, we have asked actually each of our panelists to share a pearl of wisdom about interviewing for a tenure track position with us. So we will start with Dr. Paudel first.
Yeah, I would say 2 words: connect and homework. So that's my pearl of wisdom. Network, connect, and then do your homework. If you do that, I think you will be very well prepared for the interview and whatever comes beyond.
Thank you, Dr. Paudel. Next, Dr. Mops.
Well, I completely agree with that, and I think we all agree on that point. But since there was a question that I think addresses a weakness of mine, maybe I can address it, which is about negotiations. I really don't know how people negotiate. I have no idea because I just don't know. But I will tell you what happened with me. Because I was not in a negotiating mood at all. I really wanted to come to Sinai, but I was given much better offers with much. I basically almost didn't have a package when I came to Sinai, which is fine with me. But I did feel like I had it. So this is why Dr. Rowe wound up calling me from his bungalow, because he said, look, I have to, at the end of the day, to either take this really great offer or not. It's clearly way more, of a package than Mount Sinai is offering, and I'm fine with that. But there really is just one thing I need. I really feel like I'm not going to be responsible if I don't ask for it. Boom, I got it. So that's probably the first and last time I ever negotiated on anything. But it was a very sincere, almost like a deal breaker. And I wasn't asked for the world. And so that's what I would say is, like, you're allowed to have one thing that's really a deal breaker, and people will take that seriously, I think.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Miles. And finally, Dr. King, what pearls do you like to share today with us?
I can't stress enough the importance of publications.
Okay.
And the importance of visibility. Make yourself visible at national meetings, because now you're becoming a known entity. That's really critically important. But I've gotten some responses from applicants that are like, really? Like, one would be like, do I have to teach? Yeah, you kind of have to teach. and that can be a killer in an interview. So it's really important to understand what is the tripartite mission of universities and where do you fit within that tripartite mission. And I think really important to understand, are you coming in for a tenure track position, or are you looking to be a research scientist? Very different positions. And I think it's really my pearl of wisdom to be very clear. What is it that you desire when you do that application?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. King. And I know one of our committee members have also listed some of the online sources. So hopefully that will be helpful, and that will be a start for you to explore this, how to find your first tenure track position. So finally, at the end, please join me in thanking all of our panelists for generously sharing their time, experiences, and perspectives with us today. And we also want to thank all our moderators and work group members from GSA to plan this career conversation. And thank you all again at the end, our participants, for your questions and time and attendance to this event. And a big thank you to Gina. So hopefully Gina is here for us, who has been working all the behind the scenes coordinations that make this event possible. We will send out a brief survey following this event for you to provide feedback, and so that it can helps us to plan our future events more efficiently. And at the end, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.